behind the scenes with future country rock blues kings and queens. Discover them first with Palm Mash TV. Palm Mash TV.
Well, hello there. It's Paul Mash TV time again. Thank you so much for joining us. We got a great interview coming up for you shortly. But don't forget about those subscribe button and bell buttons below you there if you haven't yet. And you'll always be notified of any new episodes coming your way. And leave a comment on the comment section if you like. And be sure to check the description because all our contact info is right there. And we'll be repeating that at the closing credits at the end of the show. So stay tuned for that. From Franklin, Tennessee today, we have Mark Anthony of the Mark Anthony Ensemble, and I know you're really going to like this guy. He's got a real great song coming up after the interview, so don't go away. We'll be right back in just a moment because it starts right now. Okay, here we are with the interview, and with us from Franklin, Tennessee, we have Mark Anthony of Mark Anthony and the Mark Anthony Ensemble, and I want to thank you for coming on the show, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Paul, and honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We're glad to have you here. Why don't we start with the obvious? And I ask this question a lot because everyone has their own story. But tell us a little bit how it all began for you as being an artist. I mean, did you always want to be an artist? Did it come much later? Is it deeper than that? I mean, tell us in your own words.
You know, I always wanted to be an artist in a sense, but you don't have that dream when you pick up a guitar at 17 years of age. You just know that you want to play music and that you love to perform. So I went all through my high school years. I went through college. I was playing, and I ended up graduating college, undergraduate studies, and I went on the road for about 5 years, making my living as a touring musician with an acoustic trio. And that's when the bug really bit me because I was living the lifestyle, right, that I had always dreamed about prior to that. And when I got off the road after those 5 years, I ended up in the Virgin Islands with this acoustic trio. And when I came home, I was so burnt out from the lifestyle. I still loved music, but I was kind of tired of that life the way it was in the late hours. So I started working a job and ended up falling into an engineering career that I didn't intend to be in. I didn't go to college for that. Well, that ended up being a 25 plus year career by accident, right? And then at that point, I was still always playing music. Ended up, at that point being a weekend warrior, playing on weekends. I was born and raised in Connecticut in the Northeast. That's where I'm originally from. And so it came to the point where I was amassing so much original material, there was no place for it where I lived. And so I set my sights for Nashville and moved here in 1987. I've been here for 36 years. This has really been more of my home than where I came from, than my home. And the whole time I've been here, I set my sights to be a artist and as a given, a singer-songwriter, because that's what I did from the beginning. And this is the place for original music, original lyrics. So those days of playing other people's music kind of came to an end, and I set my sights on being an original artist. So when I got here, to make a long story short, I found out that through sitting through writers' nights and those kinds of things where you go out and showcase your talents, I knew that in a very short amount of time, I was not going to fit the traditional country music mold as a singer-songwriter. And I was faced with a fork in the road. Either I become like thousands of other people, put on the cowboy hat, do what everybody else does, sound like everybody else, or try to sound like everybody else, or be true to myself and be an artist in the truest sense of the word. And that's what I chose to do. I chose to go down that road, write the music that came to my heart, that came to what God gave me, and be it as it may, put it out there for the court of public opinion. If people like it, great. If they don't, it's still okay, because I love doing what I do, and I make unique music. My music, my songs, as you'll see from listening to them, they're not cookie cutter songs. You listen to one song, you listen to 10 songs, they're not the same. I mix it up. I have different flavors, different rhythms, different melodies, different arrangements. So I'm still doing that. I got signed 2.5 years ago by an independent label here in Nashville called Iron Gate Records. I'm proud to be on their label as an Americana artist. They've got country artists, they've got rock artists, but they don't have anybody really that's as unique as I am, and I'm glad of that. So I don't particularly write for the country market, but my music is out there on 80 plus platforms around the world, and I now currently have 10 singles out there where I had none before.
Mm.
Yep.
Well, that's a great story. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I hope you got many years ahead of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I do too.
What were some of the influences growing up? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of the legends come to mind, but give us.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Great question. Because I grew up, I'm a little bit older. So I grew up in the pretty music of the 70s and 80s. And when I say pretty music, I'm talking about the Southern California era of the Eagles, Dan Fogelberg, Jackson Brown, James Taylor, Poco, Loggins and Messina, the folk rock. Back then they called it folk rock, right? Nowadays we call it Americana because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in any one genre. It's not exactly hard rock, and it's not folky John Denver folk. It's somewhere in the middle of that. So that's where those were my main influences. And then I got into the rock and roll years after that in the 80s and 90s. Played in many rock and roll bands. It wasn't until the late 80s that I started listening to country music. Someone exposed me to country music up in the Northeast. And at that time, country music was just changing, transitioning from that old style, 3-chord, crying your beer, traditional old country music. It was starting to be more rockabilly, had a little bit more of a rock influence. And at that time, the people that were coming on the scene were Alabama, Ricky Skaggs, Vince Gill, Steve Wariner, and they were rocking it up, and that appealed to my rock side. I had already had the folk acoustic side. So I kind of blended the two. And when I came here, you would maybe listen to my music and call it country flavored, maybe, if you will, country influence, but it is not mainstream country radio like you hear nowadays. It's a mixture of rock and pop and folk. And I call myself a true Americana artist. And like I said, that word Americana in the old days, we would have called it folk rock. Sometimes my music is more rock than it is folk. Sometimes it's very acoustic. And a lot of times it's somewhere caught in between.
Yeah, some of those you mentioned, like Loggins and Messina and
Yep.
all those other ones, they were great bands, and as I mentioned at the beginning, they are legends for sure. So
Well, that was the day when you had, structured melodies, pretty melodies, great harmonies, great vocalists, good instrumentals, and they blended it all together into music that was coherent. I'm not trying to say that the music is garbage nowadays, but it lends itself to saying that the music of that era is kind of bygone, that era where we had those nice, pretty melodies and structured harmonies and arrangements, and groups that were known as vocal groups, like Chicago, right? For instance, right? When you hear that band, you go, wow, there's great harmonies, great vocalists. And we've kind of lost that a little bit in the last several generations. And I'm still kind of holding on to that era,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And as you said earlier, you can catch all his music on all streaming platforms. So go check him out. And I know he would love you for that. And we're about ready to watch this. Well, it's more like a picture video, but it's a song anyway. It's called "When Will You Come Home Again?" Uh,
Yep.
Now tell us a story about that song. And
Yeah. And one more thing too, you can also catch me on my website. Don't get me confused with the other Mark Anthony. There's, I'm obviously confused with the other guy. That's why he took the obvious domain. My website is markanthonyartist.com. You can read all about my background. You can read about the bios of my band members. There's a shop tab on there where you can buy merchandise. I've got t-shirts, hats, all that good stuff. There's snippets of my music. There's a lot of stuff on there. But When Will You Come Home Again is a little bit different for me. Of course, like I said, my songs aren't cookie cutter. They're all quite different. And this one was different too, in that it's the way it's been described as very Jimmy Buffett-ish. Okay. Now, I'm telling people, because he just passed recently and he was a legend, I did not follow his music as a big fan. I didn't write it per se to be a Jimmy Buffett song. It just came out that way, right? So I'm telling people this is my tribute in honor of his passing. This is my tribute to Jimmy Buffett, although it's got all the other influences of my music in it. It's got acoustic guitar in it. It's got great electric guitar. It's got some gut string classical guitar in there. And a guy named Bruce Boughton, who's famous on pedal steel guitar. He played on all of Ricky Skaggs' albums. He played on Garth Brooks' albums. He played on this record as well. Bruce Boughton on pedal steel guitar. Give it a listen, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay, yeah, I know you love this song, and we're going to play that in just a second. But Marco, thank you so much for being on the show today. Come back anytime you want to plug something new. We'll be happy to have you back on.
Thanks, Paul. We'll do it. God bless you.
Okay, and here's the song, and it begins right now.